A clothing factory building collapsed in Bangladesh, killing more than 600 people. The European Union's Trade Commissioner has told Sky News the country must take immediate action to improve workers' conditions. Well, let's get more on that story now, and I'm joined by Ayesha Mustafa, the founder and director of ethical fashion retailer Fashion Compassion. Nice to see you, Ayesha. This is a horrific incident. Sadly, it's not isolated, is it, in this part of the world? What other incidents are you aware of?
Well, there was one that happened in Bangladesh just about 6 months ago in November, where about 112 people died. It was at Rana Plaza, and I was in Pakistan in September, and there were two incidents that happened as well. One was a factory in Lahore. It was a shoe factory, and the other one was another garment factory called Ali Manufacturers, Ali Garments. It was in Karachi, and there were workers that were burnt live because the doors were locked, and the conditions were so bad that they were working in that there was no fire escapes, there were no fire regulations. They didn't even know that if a fire happens, what do you need to do? So there was a lot of outcry about it, but just for, let's say, a month, and then people went on, fashion continued, people bought stuff, and it was forgotten. So it's quite sad.
How easy is it for a UK clothing company to find factories that are paying a fair wage and are also abiding by health and safety safe practices? How difficult is it?
It's not that easy, to be very honest. But say if you're a company like M&S or Primark or H&M, you are a huge giant. You have different departments. You have the knowledge and the research expertise to go out there and really find manufacturers that you think would have these checks in place. So I guess, you need to really do your research. You need to maybe have a department within these big retailers to understand how do we do sourcing, how do we do responsible sourcing. Maybe there have to be more checks in place. Maybe somebody physically from, let's say, H&M needs to actually go to those factories when they sign them up and see what are the health and safety regulations, how are the factory workers being paid, is there any child labor involved, do they even get time to eat, what are the basic rights being recognized. So I think this is something that every big retailer can do, but you have to spend more money and time, I guess.
The EU talked today on Sky News about imposing punitive measures on companies, for example, from Bangladesh. Is this the answer, or is this going to affect the people at the sharp end, the people working in these factories? Because I would imagine that a mum with 6 kids to feed would rather that she had a job paying very little money than having no job at all.
To be very honest, I look at it in a different way. I think that you just can't employ people and just say they're poor, so they need a job and that can cost them their life. I think that's not a really fair way of looking at it. I think these sort of measures are really important, and it might hurt them in the short time. But if you look at Bangladesh, is the second largest garment exporter. The manufacturers rely heavily on that industry. So with this sort of thing, which has happened today with the EU, that's also going to really affect the manufacturer. So maybe in the short period of time, it might affect the people that are making it. But if you want to look at it in a very long-term way, there has to be rules and there have to be regulations implemented to make sure that this thing doesn't happen again. And I think that has to come from the really top level. It has to come from government. It has to come from international agencies. It has to trickle down to the industries that employ them, the manufacturers, and the local government.
What about the customers? Is it down to us? I mean, we can vote with our feet, of course.
Of course.
I suppose we then need to know who the worst retailers are for this. But also, in economically difficult times, aren't people still going to buy very cheap clothes if they're there on the high street?
Yes, I completely agree. I think the biggest onus also is on a consumer. I think when I started my company, one of the biggest things that we come across is the fact that everyone wants to buy trends. If you pick up a newspaper or you pick up a magazine, what's the fashion edit? What's the fashion editorial about? It's all about trends. It's all about what celebrities wearing it. We never talk about craft. We never talk about who's actually making it, the woman behind it, the story. And people are so used to buying fast fashion. When you go to young kids are always just fast. So I think it depends on us how we educate our kids. So it has to come from within the education system. That has to change. We need to tell our kids, how do you consume? How do you become conscious consumers? Secondly, the media and the press needs to take an onus on it. We have to tell more fair stories. What are the fashion heroes? What are the garment workers? What are their histories? I think that's really important. And I think obviously your home upbringing, I think all of these are really important in making sure that you become conscious consumers. And I think if we demand less, obviously, suppliers like H&M or Primark won't probably be putting that much pressure on getting those prices, won't probably putting that much pressure to create stuff so quickly. So I think as consumers, we need to really look at ourselves.
Okay, Ayesha Mustafa, thank you very much.
Thank you.